Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Anchore. Today's focus is on increased supply chain transparency and security with Harbor and Anchore. And our hosts today will be Dan Perry, Customer Success Manager, and Josh Sapuro, also a Customer Success Engineer. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive in and get started. All participant lines are muted. But please do feel free to share any questions or commentary in the chat box, and we will be monitoring that throughout. And then after today's session, you will receive an email with a link to the recording in case you miss anything. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Brandy. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, no matter where you joined us from and what time zone you've joined us from. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are certainly more in the evening side, which is great. But yeah, we're really looking forward to taking you through the session today on, as Brandy's already outlined, Harbor and how it can really integrate with Anchore Enterprise for a better, more secure software supply chain that everyone's after these days. So a little bit more about us. As you kind of saw, we are in the customer success team at Anchore. So we work lots technically with our customers. And as a result, we get to see lots of types of deployments and environments. And we've got some, distilled a lot of this information down. Hopefully it's going to come across today so you can get kind of an idea of what is possible. And with that, what are we going to talk about specifically? Well, first and foremost, we're going to talk about what is Anchore Enterprise, and I appreciate some of you may know about that already, but also how it interacts and works with Harbor and what role Anchore can play. So if you're new to Harbor, if you're new to Anchore Enterprise, don't worry, we're going to level set and kind of introduce both of those. Then we're going to go on to ways of setting up Harbor and Anchore, right? As a registry, there are a few mechanisms which you can deploy and take to get that integration set up. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get hands on keyboard, show you how it's done. And then once we've got that set up, once you've got an awareness of kind of the different approaches, we're then going to go into the use cases, right? The feature-driven kind of capabilities that you can use with Harbor and how that can feed back into Anchore, and some of the cool things you can do with Anchore to kind of, like we said at the start, get that visibility there. And then finally, as I stated at the beginning, we work with lots of deployments, lots of customers, and we've got some kind of best practices and top tips that we want to share with you. And we're going to follow up with a bit of a Q&A. So if you've got any questions, we'll try and answer them throughout, actually. But if it's the big question you want to save to the end, please do so. Cool. Right, so today's technology, first we have Harbor, which is it's a registry, right, where you can store your containers, your software. And this is an open source piece of technology. It's a CNCF graduated project, and lots of customers adopt this because you can deploy it in an on-premise environment. It's a really fully featured kind of product, right? There's lots of capabilities that Harbor has. And perhaps we won't dig into all of those, but needless to say, it's a really cool kind of registry piece of software that has lots of capabilities that you can utilize in your environments. Then conversely, we have Anchore Enterprise. And again, I'm sure a few of you will be aware of Anchore Enterprise and what it can do. But for those who are not, it's a software composition analysis tool which allows you to look into your cloud native applications. So your images, your containers, no matter where they are on the development lifecycle. Now, Anchore Enterprise does do a little bit more than that. You can look at your source code as well, but needless to say that the kind of primary focus here is around that kind of cloud native integration that people are after. So how does that fit into the wider challenge? Well, ultimately, risks can enter into your supply chain, right? All the way from when you're hands on keyboard, writing your software, getting through those stages, right? Perhaps into CI/CD, you're going to deploy that software into a container or build that into an image. And then, of course, the focus for today, you're going to store that image in a registry, right? A registry, of course, stores lots of images. You have tags, you have repositories. We'll cover a little bit about all of that and what that means. But you've got this kind of option to get some insight into that software, into those images at that point, right? And that's what makes the Harbor integration really interesting. Then going on from that, right, you've got your software, you've got your image, and now you might deploy that into a production environment, like say Kubernetes cluster. Well, sod's law, right? I deploy on a Monday, it's got 0 vulnerabilities, but on a Wednesday, I have, say, 5 critical vulnerabilities. So how do we know that that's happened? Well, we need to inspect that production environment. And again, Anchore can do that. So across all of these stages, there are risks that, a compromised build system, an image with vulnerabilities, or a developer that uses or injects secrets by accident. There's lots of risks. How can we mitigate those? But also, how can we get insight into what's in our software? And Josh, if you go back just slightly there, the statement at the bottom, I think really rings true here, which is that with good data, right, it empowers good people, so yourselves, to make good decisions. And if we go to the next slide now, right, that's what Anchore Enterprise is all about. I'm going to ingest my data, so this is what's contained within my software, what's in my images, and of course those are stored in registries. And we're going to really focus on Harbor today. But then you've also got other sources like CI/CD and runtime, which I've talked about, right? Say a Kubernetes cluster, it could be an ECS cluster as well. But we're going to ingest all that data, then we're going to build and store that into, or catalog that into what we call SBOM management. So a storage, visibility into all of my software. I can then ask it questions and find out useful bits of information. And going on from that into Anchore Secure, I can start to look a little bit deeper. I can say, hey, does this software have CVEs? Do I have critical vulnerabilities? Do I have any malware on the files within my images? Have I accidentally placed some secrets in there, right? All of these things, again, Anchore can query and understand and surface to you, right, when you're looking at your supply chain across all those SDLC steps. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we've got all this data, we've surfaced it, but now we want to generate reports or indeed kind of have some business logic around that. So, hey, I want to deploy this in production. Is it fit for production? Well, with Anchore, you have a policy engine, right? Whereby you can build a set of rules which say, is this suitable for production? For example, I don't want critical vulnerabilities, or I don't want to deploy software that has fixes available. Or it can be more granular, like I don't want my image to be running as root, or I don't want to expose port 22, for example. All of these things you can find out within the policy engine. And then you and the system can decide whether that would be something you deploy into production or not. So with good data, good people can make good decisions, right? And we're here to help, right? All the tools here to help. And those 3 things on the right-hand side, so remediation tasks, we help developers fix and remediate these issues. The middle kind of pipe there is, we can help SecOps teams, right? What does my technical landscape look like? What risks am I exposed to? How can I control or mitigate or reduce those? And then finally, compliance, right? A big use case here is, hey, is my software FedRAMP compliant, right? Can I export that data to be able to give downstream to someone like an auditor? So hopefully that's kind of set the scene. We're going to get stuck in now with the technical details. I hope that wasn't too sort of onerous, but this information is key. And Josh, I know you always have a good question around this area, don't you?
Yes, Dan. I just want to ask, in policies, we have the ability to customize policies. So does this feature allow people from, we know that in different nations there are different standards. So does this feature allow people from these different nations to be able to customize policies that fit into these different nations?
Yes, is the very short answer. The longer answer is you've got rules which you can build together. We've got a GUI to help you do this. You can plug these rules and there's gates and triggers. Effectively, you build up a set of, I suppose, business logic to say, hey, my security control is I don't want my image to expose port 22. I don't want my image to have more than four, say, one critical vulnerability is too many, of course. But you can build these rules up to meet a certain compliance requirement that you may have, wherever you're operating in, right?
Yeah.
But it could be a standard as well. And also Anchor has done a lot of legwork to pre-populate and build these compliance requirements, right? If you've ever looked at there's a big long list of things you have to do, right? We've done the work here. We've pre-compiled these rules down into some business logic that you can just import straight into Anchor. So super easy, very valuable right out the box. But yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's a really powerful part of the platform, right? Again,
Yeah.
good people with good data, can eventually make good decisions, things like these policies.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, one more slide to kind of like level set where we are, but I promise this is definitely more Harbor related, more sort of technical now. And this is that, from my perspective, working with lots of customers, there are two kinds of ways of integrating with Harbor, right, to get this data into Anchor. One is a pull method, where I am telling Anchor, hey, here are my credentials, go talk to my Harbor registry, and you can pull out, say, a repository or an image, whatever it might be, download that into Anchor, and of course Anchor will analyze that image, scan it, build an SBOM, software bill of materials, very important, and then map that to vulnerabilities, right? That's actually very typical of lots of registries, that approach, that pull approach. That's using the Docker v2 API, which is the standard way that most registries communicate. And Anchor supports that. So we support, I'd be remiss to give a percentage, but a large percentage of registries. Then we have another approach, which is not typical with lots of registries, but something very interesting with Harbor, which is push. And what happens here is Harbor can push something over to Anchor to analyze, to build an SBOM, and to return some results. And this is achieved through a Harbor scanner adapter, right? Which is like, if you think of it, it's an agent that sits in between Harbor and Anchor. And a big advantage of this over the pull method is that you only have to set up one set of credentials. So if you've got, let's say you're on the cybersecurity team and you've got, 50 repositories, 3 Harbor registries that you're looking after, there's a lot of credentials you need to set up and hook up. It's quite time consuming and it's going to grow. We all know that. But with the Harbor scanner adapter, you make that connection once, and then you can add those to each registry, and those credentials get set up for you. And as you'll see as we talk through, you can do clever things like push on scan and all this kind of cool functionality. Right, let's dive into and actually show you some of these demos. But first and foremost, everything we're going to cover today, by the way, we've documented. We've just released, or I say we, it's the royal we coming from the UK. Josh has documented, and it's available for you to read at docs.anchor.com, or if you've got a phone, or you can use the QR code here to kind of pull up those pages. So all the types of integrations and use cases, we've gone through and documented those. Cool. Yes. Nice to see we've got some chats coming through. If you've got any questions, by the way, please do chuck them in, and I'm happy to pause and run through anything. But Josh, you're going to take us through this first kind of mechanism of setting up Harbor, right, which is pull.
Yeah.
Cool, go for
Yes.
it.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. So we have seen the different method, the different mechanism. The first one we are going to explain is the pull method, which is a more common method. So this involves actually setting up credentials of a particular registry, and then Anchor is able to pull an image from that particular registry. So in doing this, we are going to need the URL of that particular registry. And Docker is, Harbor is a Docker v2 registry. So that's the type of registry Harbor is. And then we'll have the username and the password. So if I quickly navigate to my Anchor deployment, but before then, I'd just like to show you people my configuration. So I already have Anchor and Harbor running in my setup. So this is my Harbor, and the Harbor scanner adapter Dan just made mention of is also running in my configuration. So I go to Anchor, and then I quickly go to where I see my profile name, and I go to add stock edit registry credentials. So what I want to do is to add a new credential. These are the list of the credentials I already have on my system. So if I go to add new credentials, I'm able to, my Harbor registry is accessible at this particular URL. So I can just enter this core.harbor.domain. So that's the URL accessible. I can access my Harbor on, and then I can give it any name, any user-friendly name, my Harbor, maybe registry. And it's a Docker, the type of registry Harbor is a Docker v2 registry. Anchor allows you to add other kind of registries, but we'll just stick to the Docker v2 registry. And then I input the my username and password. So I've actually sticked to the default username and password you get when you install Harbor. There are other options here. So this is allow self-signed certificates. So if this is enabled, this means that Anchor would allow self-signed certificates. But if this is not enabled, Anchor would not allow you to add a registry that has not been fully signed. So we also have validate on add. So what this is Anchor tries to check this connection before before it adds this particular registry. So if you want to add some other registries, you have some help here that you can go through. So I just add this registry. I already have this registry added, so that's why I see this message here. So this particular registry already exists, and just as I've said, you can see this particular registry here. Yeah, Dan.
And Josh, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, perfect point to kind of mention that that validate on add is super useful, right? Because
Mhm.
what it's doing is it's talking to your registry, supplying those credentials, like you said, testing it, and it's telling you, right, we got the communication working there. Because what we see in support a lot, right, is the notion that you've got your Anchor deployment here, you've got your Harbor registry here, but there might be a proxy in the way.
Yeah, true.
Might be firewalls, there might be network connections. So if you're about to start on this journey, definitely think about the network connectivity. Again, Anchor helps because it will validate that for you very quickly. And if you have issues, again, check our docs. We support proxies, custom CA certs, right? If you've got SSL termination somewhere at your proxy layer, you can kind of configure all of that with your Anchor deployment. And of course, reach out to support as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So once I've added the registry, I would see it on my list of registries. And this is the registry I added 6 hours ago. So this is how to add a registry to Anchor for the pull method. So if I go to the next slide, now we want to pull an actual image from Harbor. So in order to pull image from Harbor, if I navigate back to my Anchor deployment, I can go under images. If I go to images, I can click on analyze a tag. Now I need some information about that tag, but before I go into the information I need about that particular tag, we see that Anchor allows you to pull an image following different methods. So the first one is we could just supply the Docker pull string, and Anchor will be able to pull that particular image. Or we can input the registry name, the repository, and then the tag. So I need these information in order to pull from Harbor. So if I navigate to my Harbor, I want to pull from this particular webinar project, and the image I want to pull is this Redis image. So I want to pull this from this repository, and I want to pull the latest to scan in Anchor. So some of the information I need, as I said, is the registry name, which is referred to as projects in Harbor, which is webinar. So if I go to, I input my registry, the one I have just created, core.harbor.domain. And then the repository I want to pull from is this particular, I want to pull this particular repository, Redis. So I'm just copying it, and I input that in my Anchor. And the tag I am interested in pulling is this latest tag. So after filling all of these, there are some other options here I can utilize. The first one here is watch tag. So this is, it depends on your use case. This is a very important tag. So what this does is it constantly watches this tag, and if there is a change in this tag, Anchor would initiate a scan even to this tag. Also, we have the receive alert. And what this does also is when there's a change, and you can receive alerts even regarding this particular tag. And we have also the force reanalyze. So sometimes we may have analyzed a particular tag, and there's a need to reanalyze that particular tag. So we have this option, force reanalyze, to tell Anchor to reanalyze this particular tag. I also have some another interesting option here, which is to add annotations. So sometimes you may want to keep track of the different scans you have made in Anchor, and with that we can do that by adding the key and then the value, just to keep track of the different scans you have made to this particular tag. So if I click on analyze, so what Anchor does is it tries to pull this particular image. So for now it says cannot fetch image. So I might have entered something wrongly. Core.harbor.domain.
What did they say in IT? Never work with animals, children, and live internet connections.
Let me try to pull this one.
Okay.
And see what happens. Okay. Same error.
Is your domain correct?
Let me check the domain. Core.harbor.domain. Core.harbor.domain. Yeah, I guess it is. 1 minute. Webinar, Redis. Let me try pulling a different image, please.
Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Yeah. Alpine. Yeah, so there was definitely something wrong with my configuration there.
Do you
So
know
what
what
now?
do you know what it might be, Josh? And this is a common problem, right? Customers face. It might be a permissions thing that you've added those credentials, which was for, say, a few of those repositories, but that the Redis one was a new one. and it might, maybe it didn't have permission, right? And that's why the Harbor scanner adapter, we'll come to that in a bit. This push
Yeah.
method is perhaps a bit better because Harbor takes care of, and Anchor takes care of the credentials. Anyway, I thought that was a
Yeah.
good point to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah, thank you. And then the good thing we're trying to troubleshoot is you can actually see what happens from the logs, but we wouldn't go into that now. So my image is currently scanning, and if I go back, it should be over. So it has finished analyzing this particular image. So if I click on the share of this image, I can see some details of the analyzed image. Now, Anchor provides a very rich interface for you to get details into a particular image. So for example, we see some of these options here. I would like to go to vulnerabilities to just show some of these options. The first one we see here is vendor-only CVEs. So if this is enabled, what happens here is we are going to see only CVEs that the vendors have accepted. That's just the only CVEs we are going to see. So there are some times where a particular CVE can be published, a particular vulnerability can be identified, but the vendor does not maybe see that as a vulnerability or has not acknowledged that. So we may want to display only CVEs that vendors have agreed that they are vulnerable, and we can do that by activating this. Also, we may decide to just search by only criticals. So Anchor can also help us achieve this. And there are some other things we can do here. So for example, we can see also the package where the detail to that particular CVE, where this is some package information about this particular file. And if you go to SBOM, there are lots of other information, important information that you can see also here.
Nice.
Yeah,
And
Dan,
Josh,
you
if
can
we go
say,
back to
yeah.
vulnerabilities, there's something really cool actually with this particular image, because if you look at that path, right, I'm a developer, I want to remediate this particular vulnerability. Well, it's telling me where that binary is. And
Mhm.
that's important because you may have 3 or 4 copies of a package in a system, right? Especially a bigger image as well. And what's also cool about this is that it's a functionality very specific to Go, but it's a binary. How do we know that it's using standard lib in that binary? Right, standard libs is actually quite a common package, but how do we know that? Well, Go or Go binaries, yeah, they expose, if you run a certain command, if you're in the Golang world, you'll know about this. They'll expose the dependencies or the modules that it uses. And so our catalogers or our analyzers, our scanners, if you will, when we're building that SBOM, we're looking at this detail and we're pulling it out. So you're getting a very rich, full-bodied, to use a wine analogy, or maybe a kebab analogy, Josh, for you from Cyprus, right? You would want lots of vegetables, a good selection of food, right?
L-
This is the
And
same,
lots
right?
of meat in it, yeah.
There's lots of meat, exactly. We want lots of information and fix available as well. This is important, right? Can we fix
Yeah,
this now?
yeah,
And there
yeah.
are more things, right, we can dive into that perhaps a focus for another webinar, like, hey, can we filter out base image
Hmm.
vulnerability,
Yeah,
right?
like the metadata, yeah.
Yeah, we
You
got
could
the
also see the
ancestry there.
ancestors, yeah. And then
But,
you can also see the
yeah,
build information, yeah.
we can add the Docker file, right? So we
Hmm.
understand what's happening with this image.
Yeah.
But yeah, Josh, just dial back up because I just want to touch on, adding that registry, right? If you go back to the image, you can watch a tag, can't you? And you can watch a
Yeah,
repository.
yeah.
So there's the toggle there, or you got the toggle here in this UI,
Hmm.
this particular screen.
Yeah, yeah, you got it
Got
here
it
as well.
here as well, right?
Hmm.
And you can do this for the Harbor registry itself. So if you go back up to if you scroll up a bit, Josh, and click on core.harbor.domain, you can see all of my Harbor registries are
Hmm.
here. I've
Yeah.
now got a button on the right-hand side called Watch Repository. And of course, with that, what we're doing with watching is we're listening. We're constantly polling your Harbour registry or your Harbour tag for changes. And that's important because, you know, someone may have maliciously released a newer version of, say, version 1 of my image, or I could have a downstream change that I want to reflect and scan and understand, right? So this is really helpful to get good data so you can make good decisions.
Yeah, and then it goes back to what you explained about the pipeline, watching the pipeline, every stage in the pipeline. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Don. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, you've covered like the whole kind of pull
mechanism,
right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
this
so
is very traditional. Sorry, go for it. You're going to jump to push now, right?
Yeah, so I will move to push, which is something unique about Anchor. And I'm going to explain push, even in respect to Harbor as a registry. So just as Dan had earlier explained, we need a Harbor scanner adapter to be able to go through the push mechanism. But we already have documentation here to explain how this is being deployed, how the scanner is being, the Harbor adapter is being deployed, and also how it is configured in Harbor. So after I have set up my adapter and it is running as I have shown here, if I navigate to Harbor under interrogation, I can go to my scanners and I'll be able to add this particular scanner. So once I add this, what I'm telling Harbor is whichever project is making use of this scanner, when you want to scan, you use Anchor. You want to scan for vulnerabilities in the images in that particular project. So I am going to push an image to Harbor, and then we are going to see how Harbor scans using Anchor. So I just want to list out the images I have in my in my system, and what I'm doing now is I'm creating a tag, and I would like to push let me push Redis. I'm pushing this particular Redis 4. And what I am doing is I'm tagging it actually. I'm tagging it as core.harbor.domain. And I want to push it to my webinar folder or project and Redis. So what I've just done is to tag this, and then I would like to push it to this particular. So I am pushing now. So the layer already exists. So meaning this is already in my Harbor registry. So if I navigate to my project under webinar, I can see Redis there. So what happens here is when this is being pushed, this particular image is scanned in Anchor. So just to demonstrate this, let me push another image so we will see how this scan happens. So I'm tagging another image. Now I would like to tag something different. Maybe I tag my underscore open JDK. Jenkins. So I just pushed this image, Jenkins. And if I go to my Harbor, I go to this particular project again. So I will see what I have just pushed. And this is the image I just pushed. In this repository, this is the image I just pushed. So what happens here is a scan has been initiated here in Harbor. So if I go to the results, I can see the results of this particular scan here. If I move into Anchor also, I should be able to see this particular scan done. So apparently I already have it in Anchor.
There it
Jenkins.
is, yeah, at the bottom.
Yeah.
Was it webinar?
No, it's webinar.
Is it page 2? It's always page 2.
Page 3. Yeah.
There we go. Is it JD? Oh no, it was Jenkins that you ran,
No,
wasn't
no.
it?
Sometimes it takes time to appear in Anchor.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
you
but
click the view incomplete analysis, it might be queued up.
yeah. So let's see.
Or is it just come in?
Webinar Jenkins. No, not yet.
Okay. Check page 2. Otherwise, I think I have an idea. Okay, Josh, if you go to Harbour, we may
Yeah.
have missed a step here. So, but this is fine, right? It's a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the configuration for the Jenkins repo,
So it's the webinar repo, yeah?
yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah. And if you go to configuration, did we do scan on push?
No.
Not.
Yeah, no.
So if we ticked that option, when you push that image, it would have sent it to Anchor, right?
Automatically scan, yeah.
Yeah. So let's save it and let's try re-pushing that image again. Maybe it should trigger that off if we want to see that results. If not, that's fine. We've got some other examples to draw on.
Yeah, so I think what happened here is that image had already been sent. It had already been scanned. So if I go to images,
Try page 1, Josh. It's stuck on page 2 now.
yeah, sorry, page 1, yeah.
I know I said the results were always on page 1. Is it at the bottom? There we go.
Yeah, so it,
Maybe it
it
was there
was
all along. I don't
yeah,
know.
it was there all along. So what
Everyone was
what
screaming
happens
at me.
sometimes, yeah. So what happens sometimes is if this image had already been scanned, we'll see it here also. So if I go to this image, it has been analyzed and it was analyzed a few seconds. So sometimes actually it takes time to appear in the UI here, even though it has been scanned. So if I go to see the results, then I can see some of the report of this particular scan here. Now, Dan, would you like to talk about some of the differences between the
Yeah,
results we see here and what we see in Anchor?
I'm sure people are thinking, well, I've seen the results and we've talked about those within the Anchor UI, but we also have results here in Harbour, right? Which one should I use? And of course, depending on your scenario, use the one that works for you. But I have to say the Harbour interface doesn't have all the information, right? So you can see the CVEs, you can see the criticality, but you can't filter out, right, which ones are from my base image. You can't filter out which ones are from the OS and not my application. You don't see the fixing information here,
Mhm.
right? There are some details that are not always there, right? And it's harder to kind of drill into and find the details. And of course, the details help you with remediation. But, from a high level standpoint, right? Maybe you're in cybersecurity, you just want to get that sort of like a very high level skim across these images, across your repositories. This is great. You can quickly see it. But needless to say, you can set up a login, you can get into Anchor and check out the granular details, and you can see things like policy compliance here. So this is
Mhm.
where, I'm checking this image not only for vulnerabilities, which is what Harbour does, but I'm checking it against my policy. Is this image FedRAMP compliant, for example, right? We could do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Cool.
Yeah, so let's move forward. Dan had just made mention of the automatic scan, the scan on push, automatically scan images on push. Yeah, so that particular repository, this was not enabled, but once this is enabled, once you push an image, as we had done, that image would be automatically scanned by Anchor.
Yeah. And Josh, just like, can I just probably worth unpacking, like, why is that useful, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, in the pull method, I can watch a repository, watch a tag. We showed that. But with this approach, right, if you're pushing into Harbor, let's say you've got a CI/CD pipeline, your developers are pushing into your Harbor registry, and now you can get those images, that detail, that software, out into Anchor automatically, right, by ticking that box.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of the case of, it's a way of kind of hooking into your registry to kind of scan and kind of inspect and analyze and get good data. But also, a key thing here I just want to draw upon is, I said it earlier, that you only have to set up one set of credentials because the Harbor Scanner adapter, a bit of a mouthful, but the adapter itself that acts between Anchor and Harbor sets up the credentials. And Josh already knows what I'm going to say because he's got it up on screen. So you can see here, there's a long list of credentials, right? Josh actually added a Jenkins repository. That was brand new, but he didn't have to add a username and password. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because the scanner adapter created all the credentials for us. So, yes, push and pull can achieve the same things, but you can see there's a little bit of ease with the kind of push mechanism that Harbor kind of offers. Again, every deployment, every customer, every environment is different, but there are certain ways you can rearrange the Lego bricks to get what you need here.
Yeah. Thank you. So we also have scheduled scans. So this is also a scan that what happens here is instead of relying solely on scans, this particular scan can be configured to and scan all your images, maybe in a particular schedule. So we have different schedules like hourly, daily, or you can also customize when you want the scan to be triggered. So this is also a push method. So we can configure this by going back to Harbor, and then if you go to interrogation and you go under vulnerability, you are able to perform a scheduled scan. So if I click on edit, I can tell it the frequency or when I want the scans to happen. So Dan, would you like to say or talk about some of the advantages of this feature and how it ties to Anchor?
Yeah, again, if you want to, again, let's say I'm someone who works in cybersecurity, I want to get a broad kind of view of my estate, my set of repositories, right, and the tags and all that good stuff. This is a great way, right? I set up the scanner adapter, I push one button. I can do that once a week as well, right? And I can get those results back. And of course, you can see some information here about the run itself, right? And how successful it was, any errors. But George, if you go to Security Hub on the top left up on the top tab there.
Security Hub?
Yeah, in the middle. Yeah. To the right a bit. To the right. There's a tab, there's a breadcrumb to the right under
Okay.
interrogation services.
Under interrogation. Okay, yeah.
It's above the scan. Yeah, there we go. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Yeah, this dashboard here, right, again, gives you a high level kind of view of things. The Anchor dashboard can do that, but a lot more, as we've already discussed. But if you're doing those weekly scans, right, again, it's just a nice kind of mechanism. Again, every deployment, every environment is different, right? But you've got the capability there.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Just what a quick one. We've had one question already, and we've sort of been
Mhm.
going through that, which is great. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to chuck them into the chat. Always happy to kind of divert and go to an interesting area or question, whatever it might be. Cool, great, yeah. I see Ruth is liking the interrogation service, which is good. Yeah, it's a useful feature.
Yeah. So we also have a feature to prevent vulnerable images from running. So you could set this feature to prevent maybe images with a certain level of vulnerability or certain severity of vulnerability. You can set this, you can configure this such that such images will not be pulled from the Harbor registry. So we can do this by going still into that particular project. So whatever project you would want this setup on, for example, one setup in this pool demo, if you go to configuration, you can set it up here. So what we do is to activate it, and then you tell it what severity level should it not allow that particular image to be pulled. For example, I can set this on high. Yeah, Dan, go on.
No, you've explained it really well. So effectively, you can say, right, well, I'll step back. When I interact with a registry, I could be a developer, I could be a production cluster, right? And I'm going to talk to the registry to say, hey, can you give me, please, in HTTP world, please give me this image. And you'll download that image, all the layers, and then you'll be able to run that piece of software or that image, right? But if that image has vulnerabilities, and of course those can come up at any point, right? Like I said earlier, on a Monday it's fine, but on a Wednesday we've got 5 criticals. We don't want to pull that image potentially, right? We don't want to run vulnerable software. So this is really useful to be able to tell the registry, because it's aware of the vulnerabilities, it knows it shouldn't allow people to download that image. Yeah, you have to be careful how you use that, because let's say you've got images in production that are running, the cluster scales up, it needs to pull more copies on new nodes, right? It needs to be able to pull those, and if it can't, that could be problematic. But this can be used in really interesting ways, say in a staging cluster and dev cluster, to again kind of prevent the proliferation or the downstream kind of implications of having images with vulnerabilities in them. And there was one other thing I was going to mention here, which was, now, you're probably thinking, how can Anchor access the image, right, to scan it? And it's because, again, it's using those robot credentials, those automated credentials. So it's got its own way of pulling those images, okay? So again, super useful. Anchor's got that kind of high level of integration with Harbor here.
Yeah, so then are you saying that Anchor can still pull these images even if I set it at critical?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
critical is probably what most people would set that at, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's probably another good thing to say.
Yeah. So we have another feature in Harbor, which we can use to improve security, and that is to set proxy cache. So what this does is Harbor can allow you to pull images from other registries. And how you can do this is to first of all set up a proxy connection to that particular registry. So if I go under Harbor and I go to registries, I can create an endpoint. And if I go to create an endpoint, I have different providers I can select from. So for example, I want to add a Docker registry. I can just click on Docker. I give it any name, a name I am comfortable with, and then I can set my access IDs, my Docker, and I can set access ID and secret, and this would automatically add this to my list of endpoints. So once this endpoint is created, you need to tie it to a particular project. And unfortunately, you cannot tie it to existing projects. You may need to create a new project. So if I create a new project, I say my domain, and I make it public. If I want Harbor to be able to pull from that endpoint I just created, I need to enable this feature, and I select one of those endpoints I saw in my endpoint. So once I select this, so what this tells this particular registry I just created, or this particular project I just created, is it can pull from this particular endpoint. So it can pull images from this particular Docker registry. Than any addition to the importance of this particular configuration in Harbor.
Yeah, it's public repositories like Docker Hub are super useful, right? They contain lots of images, lots of pieces of software. But in some environments, especially our production environments, we might not want people to be able to utilize those images from public repositories, right? Trust but verify, I think, is the common saying. There lie dragons is another one. But what you can do with this proxy cache feature is say, hey, there are some reputable images here in an upstream source like Docker Hub. I want to be able to pull those through and use those, right? But I want to be able to control that. And you can do that with this. I mean, we showed a simple setup, but there's a bit more you can do here. Also, you've got a copy of those images locally. So let's say Docker Hub goes down for maintenance. Well, it's not a problem. You've got your local Harbor registry running, and it's got a copy of that image. So you're going to be, business continuity is going to be in a good state. So for customers that operate in those kind of niche, kind of more lockdown environments, this can be super helpful. You can prevent developers from utilizing a wide variety of images, right, by only allowing them to use Harbor. And of course, you've still got that integration with the scanner and all the other good things that we've been showing you into Anchore itself. And one last thing to say, and it's a good example on the screenshots here, is we store our own software in Docker Hub, right? You can download a copy of that software when you've got your access token. And what you can do with this proxy cache feature is use that token to download our software into your own repository so that you have a local copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of see this here, Anchore Enterprise. I've got version 5.13. We've got 5.14 out now, so it's a little bit out of date, but you get the kind of idea, right? And you can see from that Docker pull, I am using my Harbor domain, then I'm using an extended kind of directory path, which is related to what's in Docker Hub. And it's clever enough to go upstream and pull that down. So really all you have to do is pull that image and it will pull it through from upstream. And you just need to update your deployment manifests, to reflect that new image location. But super useful feature. It's not just about securing and understanding your images, your software, but it's also about securing your deployment itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so top tips and best practices. I hand over to you, Dan.
Yes. So I think perhaps the theme throughout has been, and hopefully this has come across, with good data, right? You can empower yourself to make good decisions. You've probably also seen there's more information available in the Anchore Enterprise UI itself, right? And by the way, all of this information can be utilized through Anchore CTL, which is our command line tool. So you can get that granularity at the command line. But there's more you can do as well, downstream integrations. We didn't cover that today, but we covered it in the chat. There was a question from someone around this, and with notifications and subscriptions, we can do clever things like, hey, we've scanned this image, push the results over here to a webhook, to an email, to Slack, whatever it might be. So needless to say, get that data in, super important, get scanning, get analyzing, get adding today. Then you can start to make good decisions tomorrow. Second point, configuration. There are some details around how to set up Harbor Scanner Adapter. Check out our docs, the new docs for that. Always consider network topology, right? Allow for that. Make sure things can talk to each other like Harbor and Anchore. If you need to account for things like SSL or custom CA certs, you can do that as well. And then finally, with configuration, if you're scanning lots of things, say hundreds of thousands of images, you might need more analyzers in your Anchor deployment. And then finally, a common saying maybe, but security begins at home, right? Think about least privilege. Use different credentials if you're, especially if you're using that pull method. Use different credentials for each repository. And by the way, we didn't show this, but it's in the docs. So go check out the docs. You can utilize API keys as well. So you don't have to use user credentials at any of these points. You can use robot service accounts, whatever you want to call it. But these are API keys that you can use at all the integrations we've talked about today. Cool. Wrapping up, and then I want to, any questions, please do put into the chat. Quickly, we've covered what is Anchore Enterprise, what is Harbor, and what the role that these two play. We talked about how to set up the push and the pull methods and the benefits of each of those. We've talked about the features that exist within Anchor to allow you to do scanning in different ways and getting data into Anchor in different ways. And we've explored, what the benefits of that data, right? Where would I go to find out certain bits of information? And then, of course, I've covered top tips and best practices. And of course, these are things that we see from working with customers, working with deployments day in, day out. So with that said, I think we've got another slide with a few links. Is there another slide, Josh?
Yes.
Yes. Check out these links, right? Maybe you want to know more about SBOMs. We touched on those. There's a really cool ebook there. More details about Anchor Enterprise. We've got some GitHub if you want to learn about the scanner adapter, and also how to secure your Kubernetes at scale, right? If you want to look at that area a bit more holistically. Any questions, please do pop in the chat. We've got a few minutes to answer those, but thank you so much for sticking around and listening. I hope it was helpful, and thank you, Josh, and thank you, Brandy, for running us through as well and supporting us on the call.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Any questions? Slides. Yes, the slides will be available, as will the recording. So watch out for those. You'll get an email with the details around that. And like I said, go check out the docs. If you can't wait for that email, check out the docs. Yes, Josh, thank you. You got the docs open. Great.
Yes, and then also, if you have any questions and you are making use of Harbor and Harbor, you can actually raise a ticket anytime. We are very happy to receive your tickets.
Absolutely, good point. Here to support you.
Yeah.
Brandy, you're on mute.
I said, fantastic. Great job today, gentlemen. I think that was a really engaging session. Thank you, everyone, for who joined today. And as Dan mentioned, please watch your email for the follow-up that will include the slides and the recording. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.